Good evening, everyone. I am really excited about tonight's session number 51. Uh, Colin, you and I were talking about the fact that during the COVID era, we were doing a lot of Zoom tastings, and that's what really got this group up and running. It's from a bunch of people who used to go to many whiskey tastings together over the years. And then COVID hit, and then we decided we needed to do something to keep the community going. And the technology allowed us this forum to interact with people like you one-on-one. And I can't believe this is session number 51 already. It's
It's
crazy,
amazing.
it's amazing. And you've always been on my list, okay, to get on here. It's just taken a while. And let me tell you why. Um, Many of us here are friends with Brett Pantani from Binny's. Okay. We've gotten to know Brett over the years.
Great
And
fellow.
a bunch of us from our synagogue, we've actually been having an annual fundraiser at Binny's with Brett. And we've done it for 19 straight years now. And Brett likes to introduce us many times to new whiskeys. And a few years ago, he introduced us to Colkegan. Now, there's somebody on here, Sandra, who's a very good friend of ours. And Sandra took a nose of Colkegan mesquite smoked before I did. And she all of a sudden got this big smile on her face. And she looked at me and she said, "Your brisket." And a number of us here, by the way, we actually compete in kosher barbecue competitions. And obviously, we're very familiar with smoking meats and stuff like that. So I've wanted to get you on here for years, and I'm just thrilled that I was at the American Craft Spirits Show at Binny's about 2 months ago, and that's where you and I met.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was just wonderful. So, Colin, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you're coming from right now.
Well, my name's Colin Keegan. Obviously, not much ego involved in naming my whiskey, but we're having a tasting here. I'm calling in from Santa Fe, New Mexico. So we are in the midst of a lot of snow and cold weather out there. Perfect for whiskey drinking.
That is perfect for whiskey drinking. And for those of you who don't know the geography of New Mexico, I actually, believe it or not, I do some research before these events. And I didn't realize that Santa Fe has an elevation of 7,000 feet.
Yeah.
So you said that it's like 18 degrees out there right now, and you've got 6 inches
Yeah,
of
it's
snow on the
about
ground?
80 degrees, 6 inches of snow on the ground. It's our elevation, not our latitude or longitude that gets us the weather. It's just the fact that we're up in the mountains. Any
Got it.
storms that come through turn to snow at this time of year.
Got it. But obviously you're not from New Mexico.
Yeah, no, I'm born a bit. No, I'm only kidding. Originally Northern England by way of all kinds of other places because my dad was in the military. But I have actually lived in Santa Fe longer than I ever lived in England, which is
Wow.
just can't shake this silly, drawl that I've got. But it works for whiskey tastings anyway.
Right. And it does work in whiskey tastings because you really feel at home with a lot of the people who make whiskey and
There
who
you
drink
go.
it. But you, from what I read, you were not a distiller professionally starting off in life. You were an architect, right?
Yes. So the very quick backstory is, yeah, I was an architect for about 15 years here in Santa Fe. Um, Moved here basically to do some architecture. When the economy took a downturn in '08, nobody needed a architect designing their second or third home on a golf course. So I started thinking, well, I've got this apple orchard where I designed a house, put it in an apple orchard. We had friends over for apple tastings, apple brandy tastings because I was making apple brandy. Then I realized, well, as the economy's taken a downturn, I'll turn my hobby into something bigger. So I researched what does it take to sell a bottle of apple brandy, at which point I realized, yep, I'm a moonshiner. I better stop this immediately. So I did. I got a building, got a still, and as you spend that much money, you have to put a business plan together, which basically became apparent apple brandy wasn't going to cut it. I'd be better off in the whiskey world. And here we are. There's a lot more to tell, but we can
Right. And
pontificate
and the
later.
name of the company is actually Santa Fe Spirits, right?
That's right. Yeah. Santa Fe spirits.
Right, because I noticed that you make whiskey, you make the apple brandy, and I think you make a gin as well, there's a
Yeah.
few other things. And what we're going to do, the way this is going to run tonight is that we're going to start talking about the whiskeys and tasting the whiskeys while we're having a conversation. I know that people might be thirsty. We haven't had a session for several weeks. So what I'd like everybody to do is go to your first whiskey here. And Colin and I are going to be talking about this. So, Colin, I love the fact that you actually bottle and sell an unsmoked version of your
Yeah.
whiskey because you're known for the smoked version. Okay.
We are,
So,
yeah.
so tell us about your barley source. I would assume that barley doesn't grow in New Mexico, right? Am I right about that?
No, it doesn't. You can grow it here. It's a bit of a struggle because just irrigation isn't particularly good for growing barley. You do need to sort of have some moisture in the air, which we don't. Even bigger problem is there's no malting facilities here
Ah, right,
because it's hard to grow grain. So we
right.
we do get our grain. And sorry, by the way. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, cheers.
Cheers. We can talk
Mm,
about the flavor profile in a minute. So
yeah,
the
yeah, sure.
grain actually comes from Breese Malting House,
Oh, Breeze, sure.
Breese up there in Wisconsin, Chilton,
Right.
Wisconsin. And we were buying it from BSG for quite a while. And we did some tests across the board, and the grain is very similar. It's a North American grain, which means some of it could be Canadian, but we like the Canadians too.
Okay.
So it's all
So
North American.
and all of your single malt spirits, the grain comes from Breese in Wisconsin.
Now it does, yes,
Now it
as of
does.
the last year.
Okay.
Um,
Because I
it's a
have one of your older bottles. I have one of your older bottles here.
yeah,
Okay. So this was not from Breese then, is what you're saying.
yeah. That well, the mesquite smoking, what we're drinking is the unsmoked.
Right.
Mesquite smoking has always come, well, for the last decade has come from Breese Malting House.
Okay.
And they
Right.
branched out and worked their price point, to be honest. And now we can afford all our grain because 2/3 of the grain is unsmoked, which is actually what we're drinking here,
Right, exactly.
is the regular grain. It's a 2-row raw barley, RAHR, the classic brewer's barley. It's a single malt, so that's all that's in there.
Mhm.
And your group here knows enough about, grains and what have you, but we can keep
It's
it.
delicious. It's something sweet. There's something very sweet about it. It's delicious. Very refreshing. Um, and I'm getting a little bit of the oakiness from the wood. Can you tell us
Yeah.
about your barrels? Because according to your website and a few articles I read, you use a combination of different kinds of barrels. You have some large barrels, you have some small barrels. I think some of them are used, some of them are
Yeah.
virgin. Can you tell us a little bit about your barrels?
Well, everything you're drinking here is aged the classic way in a 53-gallon New American white oak cask. And I say that that's how they started.
Hmm.
2/3 of what's in here is used bourbon casks we buy from Kelvin Cooperage, actually in Indiana, just over the border from Kentucky. Um, they source our new and our used casks. So it's odd talking about the unsmoked first, but it has the
Right.
same, except for the smoked grain, which you're going to taste on the next sample. It's made exactly the same, except for that one little thing. So 2/3 of the casks are used bourbon,
Mhm.
Kelvin Cooperage. 1/3 of them are straight New American white oak with a medium char.
Okay.
So it's a pretty classic way of doing it,
Right.
except we're using some new oak in there too, which
Got it.
is one
Right.
of the
Because a
good
lot of
things.
right. Right. A lot of single malt, they don't do new oak. They're using all ex bourbon
Yeah,
casks or something
yeah.
like that.
That's one of the good
And
things about, sorry, go on after you.
well, what about the age? Is it is the juice coming from the virgin oak casks aged for the same amount of time as the
Yeah.
juice that's coming from the ex bourbon casks?
What we actually do is we make now of this one that you're drinking, the
Yeah,
unsmoked, we
the unsmoked.
make, I don't know, about 20% of what we make. We're a very small distillery. We're only making this year, 24, we're planning on 400 casks.
Okay.
That's tiny, really.
Yeah.
But of those 400 casks, we're probably going to do about 80 casks of unsmoked, meaning there's no smoke on the grain.
Right.
Some new, some unused. What that's going to mean is we're going to have plenty at the levels it's selling at the moment. Of course, as we grow, we just make more,
Right.
and carry on from there.
And about how old are
Oh,
the
sorry.
whiskeys in here?
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
okay. Don't worry about it. I'm good.
So every whiskey we make now, we started with a slightly younger group, is a minimum 3-year old.
Okay.
Most of the whiskeys we put out are closer to 4 because it's a flavor profile thing.
Right.
As we sample 60 casks, then we take it down to 30.
Mhm.
We take those 30, we take it down to about 15, give or take, that then go into a blend. It's not a blended whiskey, it's a single malt.
Right. Right.
But the blend of what we're gonna use for the flavor profile.
Right.
So on average, I think we're kicking along at about 4 years, but it's possible that one of the 3-year-old casks could make it into this. So you have to
Right.
go with the minimum.
Right. Exactly. But one of the nice things, one thing that I like that you said here is that, one of the nice things of building up an inventory of more unsmoked casks is
Yeah.
that you can then you can do different things with them. You can age them different ways. You can finish something in like an export cask, or an ex-brandy cask or something like that. And you can't really do that if they're all mesquite smoked, because it wouldn't be,
Well,
it would change the profile.
well, it does change the profile, but the regular Colkegan, the one we're going to do next, which is our what we call our flagship or classic,
Definitely.
we do actually age that, which is your third sample, in that's sherry cask, Pedro
Right.
Jimenez sherry casks. We do an apple brandy cask finish,
Nice.
and we just come out with a bottled in bond, which is another different story, to be honest. So we
Nice.
now have
So
6
you
different
so you
whiskeys.
actually have so what you're saying is that you actually have your unsmoked single malt that you're aging in different ways, but also the smoked single malt that you're aging in different ways as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Oh, that's fun. That
which
must
is
be a lot of
fun.
fun.
There's a lot of nuances. We've got 6 different whiskeys in the single malt category at the moment.
Got it. Wonderful. And I know that the mesquite smoked is your flagship, but this particular one, the unsmoked, is this available in all the same markets that the smoked one is available?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we sell online. It looks like you go into our website. We sell online, and Mark can fill in more details actually on how all that works. But you just go to our website and just order away.
Got it.
Mark's group takes care of basically all the details. It's nice for us,
Got it.
and it will ship out within 3 days, 3 to 5 days.
Does
From Washington.
I wonder, I haven't checked. I wonder if Binny's has this one because I know Binny's has Binny's definitely has the mesquite smoked. I don't know if it has the
Yeah.
unsmoked.
Binny's definitely has mesquite smoke and our cask strength, which we don't have in this lineup, but it's a green label. And I think they now have our apple brandy cask finished.
Right.
But I saw some cases go out to some of their key larger stores. But whether it's still on the shelf or not, you can always ask.
Right.
In the
Yeah,
case of
it's
sorry,
it's a shame because a lot of people are making really good American single malt, and it's just not selling enough yet, to
yeah,
justify a lot of that shelf space.
I would agree.
Yeah, I'm friends with one of the managers of of one of the local binnies, and the American single malt. There's some really good things in there that just aren't selling, and it drives some of us crazy that we see it there.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Um, so this particular one, obviously. Where we're doing it's clean. It got nice oil to it. So this one, I think we said it's 46 ABV.
46 ABV,
Yeah,
yeah.
46 ABV. Okay.
92.
Right. And do you make a cask strength version of this or not?
Not of the unsmoked, no.
Okay, not the unsmoked. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And well, as we start going on to the second one, everybody can start tasting the second one. By the way, those of you who love smoke are going to love this next one. Those of you who don't like smoke, sorry. Yeah. Um,
Well, it's pretty subtle. It's
but
not a Lagavulin Lafroig type of
no,
smoke. It's a
it's
more of
different.
a Oban or Talisker type of thing.
Well, right. It's not heavily smoked. It's
No.
more like a Springbank as opposed to long grow. It's
Yeah.
like the
Uh-huh.
middle
Yeah.
the middle of the edge. So tell us about this smoking process with mesquite. Okay, so obviously you said that you're getting your barley from Wisconsin. Okay,
Yeah.
they're malting it for you. When is the malted barley exposed to mesquite, and how is that done?
It's actually done in the malting process by Breeze.
Okay, so
So
are you sending them mesquite from Santa Fe? Because I know that one thing you
we,
mentioned was terroir. You like
yeah,
using Santa Fe stuff as much as you can.
we definitely did at the very beginning. And we then put them in touch because our stocks grew and mesquite smoking grain grew a lot. So Breeze said, can you give us the direct number of the people you buy the chips from? We were just buying bags of chips and shipping it to them,
Oh,
which we use a
okay.
lot of in fires and stuff around here. But mesquite smoking and chips are used obviously with a lot of barbecues, as you know, as a
Right.
barbecue guy aficionado yourself.
Yes.
So Breeze now just go direct to the source and order, mesquite chips.
Are the mesquite chips, are they Santa Fe? Are they New Mexico mesquite chips, or is it Texas mesquite? Do you know?
They used to be. Breeze are a great company to work with, but they now won't tell us where they get them from. So I doubt it's New Mexico because they got to ship them.
Oh, well, that's really funny.
Yeah. We
That's
we
really
love
funny.
working with Breeze, but we asked, can we just tell us where, can we put on our website that they're New Mexico? And they said, well, no, you can't say that. We want to keep our options open, which leaves us in a bit of a nebulous place, but that's okay.
Right.
So
But they're smoking this to your specifications about how much of the
yes,
smoke exposure you want.
yeah, they do. It's there's a fair bit of smoke on the grain when it comes to us,
Hmm.
but only a third of the sacks that go into the mash tun are mesquite smoked.
Okay. I
Yeah,
want to make sure everybody got that one. Okay, that's
yeah,
important. Okay. So 2/3 of the mash that's coming in for this particular expression is unsmoked, and 1/3 of it is mesquite smoked. Is that correct?
exactly. Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. And with respect to the smoking process of, that Brees is doing for you, how long are they exposing the mash to the smoke, or are you not allowed to tell us that because that's a secret?
If I knew, I would. I'm very open about this. However, we don't know. We
Okay.
sent a little bit of history on the whole thing, and Mark's going to smile when I say this. Um, Copper Fox Distilling. Gosh, I've even forgotten his name now. The distiller from Copper Fox up in Virginia.
Mark, you can unmute if you want to join in.
Um, Mark, what's his name?
It is on the absolute tip of my tongue,
I
and as soon
know.
as you said it, it went
Yeah.
out of my head.
Uh,
It'll come to me in
Everybody.
a second.
So this is Mark Schilling. Mark is you're a distributor, right? And so you're one of the
No,
distributors or bottlers for Colkegan. Is how does this work?
no. So I'm actually a former fellow distiller, which is how I first met Colin. But I now have a company called Big Thirst, and we are a direct to consumer e-commerce platform for spirits.
Got it.
So we
Okay.
actually work with Colin to get his product to a fulfillment center and then out to consumers across the country when they order through his website.
Perfect. So while we were talking, Michael Bloom from the 50 State Blend posted that the guy from Copper Fox is Rick Wassman.
Rick Wassman,
Yes.
that's his name.
Thank
Good
you,
thing I
Michael.
remember it. Yeah. So thank you, Michael. I'm glad somebody's focused here. So back in the day, Rick Wassman would put, I think he told us for 2,000 pounds of grain, he used to use a smoker that would put, I think he burned like 50 pounds of mesquite chips, which is a lot of mesquite chips, in a
Okay.
smoker into the
Okay.
grain, and then he did it the traditional way, which is laying it out on the floors with the rakes, like you see in Scotland.
Mhm.
And he did that for us for 2 or 3 years. And I say, there's a funny story. He says he did it, and Mark knows this as well. He had his mum rake it. He's my age now. His mum in her 70s would walk up and down with a rake. It was beautiful to see. And he sent us pictures. My mum's raking, it's her exercise. And that's a heavy load because it's wet grain. Anyway, we're getting off subject, but
That's a wonderful story. That's great. I
yeah,
hope she didn't get the monkey shoulder going.
no, she didn't know.
Sorry.
So that's where we started, and that's the recipe that we gave to
Okay.
Greece. And I would say it tastes the same when it gets to us and smells and tastes the same.
Yeah,
Exactly how
it's
they're doing
wonderful.
it, because they do it in now in the massive drums. It's about a 40-foot long, 25-foot wide
Mm.
drum that they spray the grain, the water, and the smoke in, and then they'll tumble it. And it's engineered, so it doesn't take a few days. It really takes, I think, a day and a half or something.
Yeah,
And
you don't need that long. You don't need that long for the
is,
exposure.
isn't that right? It's not
Yeah.
long, but and does everybody know the malting process here?
Yeah, we have so yeah,
Okay.
we have quite a few geeks in here. I mean, not
Okay,
everybody, but
so I
you
don't
know,
need to go into detail on that. We'll talk about some more interesting stuff.
yeah, I mean, you might get some questions, when we get to it. So,
Yeah.
one question I do have about this though. So, Scotch, so people on Isla who make peated Scotch
Yeah.
in Isla, how do they like this stuff? Well, what have they told you about it? Because I know that you've had some of them taste it.
Yes. Um, they like it. The phrase we use, and it's funny how we always relate back to Scotch. We sort of resist that, but we end up doing it anyway. It gives us a point of context.
Sure.
Is they say it noses like a light Islay Scotch,
Yeah.
but it drinks like a Highland. You
Mm.
you get more of it on the nose than you do on the palate. I mean, you
Yeah.
still got it on the palate, but it's not like some of them where it sits on the side of your tongue for, another 4 days after you tasted it. I'm
Right.
only kidding. Another few hours, but it's a very light smoke by comparison.
Yeah. But it's tasty. It's
It,
light but very tasty.
yeah.
It's no, it's wonderful, and we're getting some great comments here.
Oh
People love
yeah.
this stuff. And the casks that you're finishing this in, that you're aging it in, is it the same thing about where some of it is being aged in virgin oak and some of it's being aged in ex bourbon?
Yes, exactly the same
Okay,
formula. 2/3 of it in used, and
right,
one
and
third
used.
of it in new oak.
Okay, so you have a repeatable process. I mean, that's the
It's
whole
a
point here. Is
repeatable process.
a
Yeah. I mean,
repeatable
that's
process.
what you're looking at here is the base that we base everything else off. And the black labels on them mean it's the same recipe from the very beginning,
Mhm.
maybe with a different finish. The reason we went to yellow here is the recipe is different from the beginning, and
Right,
it's
because
the
right,
whiskey, hence the yellow.
right, and you're right. It's different because it's 100% unsmoked, so it's a
Yeah,
different recipe. I mean, it's still
exactly. Yeah.
100% malted barley.
Yeah.
But by the way, before we go into the next one, what is the latest with respect to the standards that are being created for American single malt? Is there? And I know there have been arguments and fights about it for years, and it's getting closer to becoming a standard. Can you give us any update about that? Because I know you've been involved in it.
Yes, the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission that we're all very much a part of in the single malt world, anyway. Um, well, we petitioned the federal government with our own set of rules and regulations to sort of give ourselves guidelines 6 years ago. Or we started it actually even longer than that now. Started it 8 years ago.
Okay.
And about 6 years ago, we put forward sort of a manifesto, if you like, to the TTB, Taxation and Trade Bureau, to put these guardrails on. And I mean, they're pretty wide, but they still haven't come back with a full definitive answer. We've been through the public comment phase, as any federal changes to anything need. and we've had a couple of comments that they've addressed and we've addressed. And they were more about aging in new oak and used oak and things like that. Nothing major. And all they're saying is it's past the public comment phase,
Okay.
which it did in September last year. And it's the federal government.
Okay. So
that
what
they-
you're saying is that we're close to the end here.
We're
And
very close to the
that
end.
soon
Yeah.
it will be an official category recognized by the US government and all that.
Yeah.
Right.
And not to belabor the point on the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, which is a real mouthful, is we call it an inclusive group more than an exclusive group. The Scottish Whisky Association say we're an exclusive group, meaning they've got tighter regulations.
Right.
We're a lot more inclusive. I mean, you can age up to 900-liter barrels, which is a standard, and you can use new and used. You can even use different grains as long as it's one grain. Obviously,
Interesting.
etc.
That's interesting. So it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be barley, is what you're
Doesn't
saying.
have to be barley. Doesn't have to have a minimum age on it.
Well, right, and that's actually a big issue because, as you know from your friends and our friends at Balcones in Waco, Texas, what they age down there can't be aged the same length of time as something being aged in your cold weather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
And
let's talk about aging.
right. So we'll talk about aging. And actually, I do want to make sure as we go on to the third expression, I really want to talk about your rick house and the changes with respect to your rick house. So one thing that I learned from Colin before this conversation tonight, until recently, they had a climate controlled rick house, which, they decided was important because of the climate changes and everything going on there. But Colin, as we're going on to this sherried expression, by the way, is there any mesquite? There is mesquite malt in here, right? So this is the same 2/3, 1/3, right?
I'll talk about the Vic House in one moment. So
Okay.
this is a sherry, Pedro Jimenez sherry cask finished with Colkegan whiskey. So it goes through the process as regular Colkegan starts off, runs through the whole process. We blend the Colkegan whiskey, which is those 15 casks, 5 new and 10 used. And then we pull off a certain amount of gallonage for putting into Pedro Jimenez sherry casks. Some goes into apple brandy casks, but the majority stays on as Colkegan. 80% of our sales are this one whiskey, and all the others are the only other 20%. So it's a minimum 4-year.
And
whiskey.
how long is it? And how long is it in the ex sherry cask?
For a full year.
Okay.
And those are sherry butts that, again, my brain's eluding me. There's a broker here that brings in casks from Portugal. What we do need to do with this is recharge it. So we pour a whole case of sherry into the cask, roll it around, kick it around the warehouse a bit, leave the sherry in there because most of it's soaked in. And then we
then you dump it.
add the whiskey.
Right.
And it typically goes in at into those casks, because another part about our aging, we can talk about that a bit more later, is it goes in at about 125 proof.
Oh, okay.
And this is 100 proof that you're drinking now.
Right, 50%, right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so all of the whiskey that is in here has been aged for 1 year in the sherry cask. So you're not blending sherry cask stuff with non-sherry cask stuff.
Not once it gets to the sherry cask, no.
Okay. So all of this has been sherry.
Yeah.
So this is 100% ex sherry cask. Okay.
Yes, 100% ex sherry cask. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can see it in the color compared to the other two.
Definitely.
Darker.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I love the legs on this one too. It's got really good legs.
Yeah, the legs on this. Well, that's 100 proof as well, 50%. So 2 things for the color. One is a different oak, because it's a European oak, not an American oak, for finishing.
Okay.
And there's 2 gallons of sherry in that cask. It's a 60-gallon cask. It's a slightly different size. It's a 60-gallon sherry butt, as it's known.
Okay. This is absolutely delicious. No, this is lovely. And you're right. It's like a lightly peated Highland. There's There's a lot to it there like that. This is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Let's see. Somebody, we had a question here about the Good Deeds whiskey that Paul Hletko was involved with and a few other people.
Oh yeah.
Which of your whiskeys was in the Good Deeds blend?
Regular Colkegan.
So the unsmoked Colkegan.
So the unsmoked Colkegan.
Yeah.
It was a large enough blend that we sent them a new cask that was minimum 3-year old and a used cask. We sent them 2 casks.
Okay, and let them decide
So
how they want to use
yeah,
it.
basically what that did was one of the reasons that we age that way is the new oak really tempers down the smokiness because it's competing with the new oak. In the used cask, the smokiness really rises to the top. So the blenders, which was Johnny Jeffrey that just came out of Bentley, Randy Hudson from 888 up there in Nantucket. Oh gosh, Reed Huddleston from Headframe.
Okay.
They were typically the 3 blenders that did the Good Deeds whiskey.
I'm always impressed with people who can do that. And like Michael, with a 50-state blend, who can bring together whiskeys that are so different and turn them into something beautiful. One question we're getting from a few people.
Yeah.
So it's PX sherry and it's Pedro Jimenez. So you said
Yeah.
this is PX and it's coming from Portugal, you said, right?
Portugal. It's a Portuguese sherry, yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's a Portuguese sherry.
And
right?
William Myers' comment, I would totally agree with. The first samples like Napogue, second like Ardmore, and the sherry cask is just something different.
Yeah, no, wonderful. No, this is just lovely stuff. So tell us about this rick house and then the changes that you've had recently, because this fascinates me.
So yeah, the basically it's not a classic rick house. It is a sealed in steel building, concrete floors, not dunnage like the old rick houses used to have. So we built a room within a room because we were heating and humidifying. So that would create a mold because of the cold, dry outside to the warm, humid inside. We get a mold there. So we got a room within that rick house. It's half the rick house.
Okay.
And we pump the heat and humidity in. Outside that into the larger warehouse is what we call man temperature or person temperature, sorry, meaning it's, from 60 in the winter up to, 78, 80 in the summer. We actually heat and cool that just for the guys working in the warehouse. When was it? It was about 18 months ago. We sort of concluded our experiment, which was basically testing the flavor profile and the angel share.
Right.
And again, I keep pointing to Mark here, but it's good to have somebody else who knows this stuff. We decided when we started that we were going to heat and humidify so we could keep a sort of consistency. And some good friends of ours, Jared, really, from Balcones.
Right, Jared Himstead.
Jared Himstead said, you know what? Let the climate, if you really talk about terroir, you should let it be in New Mexico whiskey, let it do its own thing.
Yeah.
We took that to heart. And this was 4 or 5 years ago. We actually said, we're going to run some tests. And we tested some casks outside. The angel share was higher, but the flavor profile wasn't affected, which was the key. So we looked and about 9 months ago, it is from now, we said, okay, turn off all the machinery, let the climate do what it does.
And you save a lot of money doing that too.
We save a lot of money in heating and humidifying in the winter and just humidifying in the summer. But as you all know, as whiskey drinkers, Scotland loses, again, layman's terms, other distilleries don't even like saying this. Scotland's going to lose about 5% a year. Kentucky's going to lose about 8% a year.
Right.
But unlike both of those, we have very little humidity. We lose about 12% a year.
Yeah.
And that's gone up, or it will go up from our tests.
Right. But are you getting, so one question I have though,
Yeah.
One thing that we've learned and because of these conversations, we've learned a lot here from people like you. One thing we've learned about the aging process is how active the whiskey can be in the barrel going in, with respect to the wood and the climate changes. Have you noticed any increase in woodsiness, in flavor imparted from the casks after you took away the consistency of the climate?
Yes, in the new oak,
Okay.
but we can bring that down with the used oak, which is a less oaky whiskey.
Yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
it's, the dunk in the tea bag analogy, it's a far smokier flavor profile in the used casks.
I got to tell you that this is just lovely, and I'm learning a lot here. That this is great, and the creativity. So, were you the first person, before we open it up for questions here? Were you the first distiller to actually use mesquite for whiskey here in the United States, or are there other people who claim it, or are you the first one?
We thought we were, and Del Back, which is a wonderful group of friends of
Right?
mine.
We know them well. Good people.
Steve Hamilton and I were chatting before Mark Verthaler, I
Viertaler
want to
came
say
in.
his surname.
Viertaler.
Viertaler took
Yes.
over everything. It's nebulous as to who was first, really. They might have a bit of an advantage over us that they
Okay.
did it, but they do the smoke in a different way. They put it in later. They do some smoking on site,
Okay.
which is different. I think they're doing a mix of both now,
Okay.
but we're buddies and we talk about it all the time. But we
Yeah.
always talk about the nebulous, who was first in the jibey way. Typically in a taxi from the airport on the way to a convention, and by the time we get there, we've forgotten all about it, and then we talk about something else. Like,
And then on the way back, when you have a lot of drinks in you, you have a
yeah,
different type of discussion about
there you go.
it. So, Eric, do you have any particular questions that you would like to ask Colin?
I do. So first of all, thank you for joining us. This was a lot of fun, and I love all three of the samples that you sent. I may have missed it, but when you were talking about the smoked whiskey,
Yeah.
you said it's the actual final juice is 2/3 unsmoked, 1/3 smoked. Is that you get the distillate and you blend it together before putting in the barrel, or
No.
you're taking aged smoked whiskey and aged unsmoked whiskey and you're blending about 2/3, 1/3?
No, maybe I was a bit vague about that. It's the grain, a third of the grain is smoked. Sorry, yeah, a third of the grain is smoked, 2/3 is unsmoked. That all gets mixed together and then put into the mash tun. So everything that comes out has the same level of smokiness.
Got it.
And then the difference is a third of it goes into new oak and 2/3 of it goes into used oak.
Got it. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's
no.
all the same. It's all the same juice, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's just finished in different casks.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, that's a
Ariel
great question. All
had
right.
his hand up.
Okay, so let's see who has hands up here now. Let's start taking a look here.
Ariel, I got
Ariel, okay,
Ariel
all right,
here.
Ariel
All right.
Eisenberg. Ariel, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
All right, Colin, thanks so much for being here and sharing some of your delicious product with us.
Thank you for having me.
So at the beginning of our discussion, we had talked about, it had been mentioned that you had a history with apple brandy, and I'm wondering where that comes into play, because before you even mentioned that, when I nosed that first sample, I almost got like an apple juice on it.
Oh, wow.
And that was before I had even heard anything about apple brandy. So where does apple brandy come into play? Am I just getting something that was completely unrelated to apples when I was nosing the unsmoked?
Yeah, for me, well, actually, let me back in. There's no apple brandy associated with any of these products that we have in front of us. However, I would agree that I think the unsmoked, the fruitiness plays up a lot. I get more apple skins than apples, if you know what I mean, on that. A sort of slightly drier, more tart apple in there. But I'm actually over to the Pedro Jimenez at the moment. But yeah, I think the unsmoked has the fruitiness comes more forward than it does on the regular smoke.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good question. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Let's go to William Myers.
So I might have missed this, but I had two questions. One is I was curious, what are the stills like? Did you
Oh,
describe
yeah.
the stills, if they're pot stills or
Oh, great
Colin
question. We
stills?
didn't discuss that. That's a great question.
Yeah, good question. You had two. I'll answer this one, then we can come back to the other one. It's a Christian Carl still out of Germany. And we only have the one because we're small. The only thing that goes differently through our still, we do gin through it, but it's only a 5-plate still, so there's no way we could make vodka. And when we do gin, it's only vodka that goes in the still that runs through a different condenser, through a bubbler and out that way. So primarily the still makes apple brandy. Maybe that would answer Ariel's question. We do make apple brandy in that still, but we do clean it between that and the whiskey. But it's only a 300-gallon pot still. It's a small still by distilling standards. Did that answer the question enough?
Yes. Awesome. Thanks. My other question is,
We do have an alembic head on the top, which helps with the copper contact as well. Yeah, second question, sorry.
second question is, what is your favorite single malt? Do you have favorite single malts that you love?
Gosh, I always get asked this. Mine, no, I'm only kidding. I drink enough of mine generally. I'm still exploring all single malts, to be honest, but for a softer, just whiskey that goes down so easy, Dalwhinnie. I think that's just a fantastic whiskey. One of the things that converted me to single malts, to be honest.
I find that interesting that somebody who's making, who's known for, making a flagship smoked whiskey,
Yeah.
that your favorite is a Highland and not something from Isla or Leipzig or something like that.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say if I'm going for smoke, I'll lean towards the Bruichladdich line. I think those guys do a wonderful job. And they have that Octomore. If you really want to blow your socks off, you can do, what is it? A million parts per million of smoke, which is in Octomore. It's just a smoke bomb, but it's rare that I'm into that.
Okay. Dalwhinnie's a great answer. Dalwhinnie's a great
Beth has
answer.
Octomore 8.3. That 309 parts per million. Goodness.
Wow.
We
That's
haven't
crazy,
had
man.
ours tested at parts per million of smoke, but it's got to be below 40 or 50, I'm assuming.
No, it's a light smoke, but it's delicious, and it really adds something to it.
Yeah.
So let's see. Let's go into Josh Eisenberg now. Josh, can you please unmute and ask your questions of Colin?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Really delicious. Thanks so much for this. This is really cool. I had a question. I'm a Pedro Jimenez fan, and so I was really interested in just learning more about how you chose these specific PX casks that you're using, because there's so many different expressions of PX, right? And so I'm less familiar with Portuguese expressions than I am with Spanish. So I would love to know more because I got a lightness and brightness out of it that I don't normally associate with PX casks, finished whiskeys.
Yeah, when we picked the sherry casks, it's going to sound a bit like a flat answer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It was what the broker proposed to us.
Okay.
I've got these Portuguese casks. Do you want them? Yes, we do.
That's a great answer. That's fine.
Yeah, we make a small amount. I mean, we only do 10 casks of this a year.
Yeah.
Not a huge amount.
Well, you did a great. I mean, it's really cool because it's different.
It is. Yeah,
it stands out from other PX products. Like I love them all, like children, right? They're
Yes.
they're different. And I'm not familiar with PX Portuguese, right? Versus a lot of them are Spanish.
Yeah, a lot of
I
them are
just think it's really
Spanish, yeah.
interesting what kind of character that brings to life. So thank you.
I have tried, obviously the Spanish and the Portuguese sherries, and I think the sherry itself is a bit lighter. I don't honestly know if it's if that cask was used for many, many, many years, because they do more of a Solera style where they'll keep filling the casks. But when they get to us, they definitely have some age on them. You could just tell by looking at them. It's not like you see where the hoops are, and then there's some light wood and dark wood. These things are black when they get to us. So they've definitely been through the ringer and been used a lot. I think in recharging them and leaving all the sherry in there, that will bring the fruitiness up a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, we tried it, tested it, and liked it. This was actually brought out to celebrate a 10-year anniversary of Santa Fe Spirits, which was 3 years ago. And when we did it, we thought, well, we'll see. This will be fun. It'll last a while. We sold out. Oh my gosh, we've got to do it again. Then we had to wait another whole year, but we spaced them every few months, and we now have enough volume. And we put it in our regular lineup.
That's awesome.
So this is always available then, right? So now it's
always
part of
available.
regular lineup. It'll
Yeah,
always
we
be
have
available.
this online with Big Thirst. Binny's does not have this because we haven't. Binny's is buying from us via LibDib, which is a different distributor. That's an online distributor. But if you're in the Illinois area, you could just go online and buy through Big Thirst.
Right. And that would make Mark very happy.
Make Mark happy, but don't tell Brent. Brent, I said that because he's a good buddy of mine.
Brett is very familiar with the fact that there are multiple ways now of accessing whiskeys.
There's other ways to buy whiskey than Binny's, yeah.
Yes, definitely. So Michael Bloom, please unmute yourself.
So you answered one of my questions when you talked about recharging the sherry barrels and leaving all of the sherry in there. Thanks for clarifying that. I was going to follow up on that. What additional innovations might we expect from Santa Fe Spirits in the next year or two? And as a follow-on to that, what innovations are you most looking forward to in the world of American single malts more generally?
Oh, goodness. Wow. A small question and a big question. We are really currently at the moment, we've just come out with our bottled in bond, which is quite a feather in our cap because it's not the easiest thing to do. That is available again from our website through Big Thirst. It won't make it into regular distribution because we only made 1,000 bottles of that. Its price point is up there with the sherry. And when I say it's up there, it's $100 a bottle. It's not the end of the world.
And you poured me some of that, if I remember correctly, at the Craft Spirits.
Yes, I gave you a sneak preview. Yeah,
it was delicious.
It was really good.
Yes.
And it's a bottled in bond, so it's 100 proof. It's 1 grain in 1 season with 1 distiller, and bottled at the same warehouse, which all our stuff is anyway. So that's really the last rendition, if you like, of our whiskeys that we've got. We don't have too much in the works because we're really focused on, to be honest, trying to grow as fast as we can. Actively seeking a sort of a bigger partner to take us to the next level. So we're pushing the products we have more than other products. My personal take is I'd like to see a different finish. I know, Michael, you have our apple brandy cask finished, which is really what led us into this finishing category that we're talking about here. Yeah, there you go. And that is actually from our apple brandy. So we empty the casks, we turn them back, and we put the whiskey straight in. So we don't have to recharge with anything. It's our apple brandy that's in there. which is a little bit closer to home for more of the artisanal way I'd like to do stuff. So we don't have anything major coming up. I could see the unsmoked maybe starting to be an unsmoked with a different finish down the line. But I wouldn't go back to Pedro Jimenez, or I wouldn't go back to apple brandy cask. I'd try something different. I just don't know what at the moment.
Well, I got to tell you, the PX, people here love it. So just keep in mind that people here are really liking this stuff, you know?
Yes. So thank you.
You
Yeah,
know, and
I did pour myself
since you're
another
getting
charge of
stuff,
that, so I'm
and
happy.
since you are getting stuff from Portugal, you know, there's always the possibility of, you know, using actual port, you know,
Yeah,
export
we could.
casks too.
I mean, a port would be a deeper note. I would
Yeah.
like that. But Michael's second question is, where do I see the sort of single malts across the country going? I think once we get recognized as a category, it will help us all breathe a little easier. Because, you know, when you go into a liquor store and, you know, there's a Japanese single malt section and a bourbon and a rye and, you know, a world section and American whiskeys. So we get lumped in with all our good buddies who make bourbons and ryes. I think once we get to stand out a bit more for ourselves, we'll actually be able to, well, hopefully sell some more so we have more money to do stuff with. But a lot of my friends in the whiskey world are doing the same kind of experimentation of different sherry cask finishes, different aging. I'm a bit of a purist. I believe in aging the classic way. But I have tasted some whiskeys where people have done, you know, put it through a magical machine and it does its thing. Some of them are okay. Some of them are coming on. I don't think we're going to come up in the next couple of few years with anything that beats the classic way to make whiskey. That's my view. And it's purely Colin Keegan. It's not an educated view, particularly.
Oh, you have a bunch of fans here, I'll tell you that much.
Oh, good.
Michael, did
Thank
I
you.
answer your question? Bloom? Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then look who's asking a question. You're
Oh,
good
this is going to be a
Mark
hard one, I
Schilling.
know.
Mark, please unmute.
Actually, this is really great timing because my question has to do with both innovation and aging. And I'm surprised we haven't talked about this before. But before I ask the question, I want to share something kind of funny that I don't think I've ever told Colin before. A couple of years ago, I had taken several bottles out to go do a tasting with some friends, got home and left everything in the car, and my car was broken into overnight. Um, I had a number of valuable things in the car, including quite a lot of alcohol, and the only single thing that was taken was a bottle of the Colkegan sherry cask. The only thing. And so I've been sitting here drinking the regular the original finish all night because I don't have anything else here at the moment, but I thought you'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Then I also wanted to say, since it came up in terms of Big Thirst and the online and whatnot, um, I would like to suggest or ask that you always support your local retailer first. Um, we're not in this business to take business away from local retailers at all. What we want to do is make sure that producers that have bottles that are not otherwise available locally, that folks can get access to them. So, Benny's has been a huge supporter of the craft industry for a long time, and I certainly don't want to ever be in competition with them. But that said, if you're looking for a bottle and you can't find it locally, hopefully we can help with that.
Right.
Colin, my question for you is, have you considered or done any experimentation with alternative size barrels, particularly I know a lot of people have used larger or smaller barrels in terms of trying to reduce their aging time, but I know some folks that are actually using larger barrels, particularly in hotter climates, to what they see as pretty beneficial effects. And then the second part of that question is, have you done or would you consider doing any experimentation with alternative woods? And I know alternative wood barrels are more scarce and harder to find, but maybe
Yeah.
even using staves and things like that with alternative woods.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh, where do we even start? We do age our apple brandy in 25-gallon casks because we only age it for a year, and we wanted to have definitely a lot of oak with the sweetness of our apple brandy. It's not necessarily just whiskey. So for the first 5 years, give or take, of apple brandy cask finished Colkegan, which would have been just like this, but with apple brandy casks, we used the 25-gallon casks that had only been aged for a year to age apple brandy. It still pushed the oak a bit. We haven't ever, as I said, I'm a bit of a purist, which isn't necessarily financially a sensible thing to be in the liquor world, to be honest. But I like the 53s. I think we sort of understand them. There's so much history with them that you don't need to do all the experimentation yourself. There's so many other people that have done all that for you. Having said that, as we grow, to be honest, it's a cash flow issue. We've got to keep making what we make and make it as best as we can, as much as we can on our small scale. When we forget to scale, I'd love my job to be, the mad professor in the background saying, what about 2-gallon casks? What about 500-gallon casks? I would like to try different things. My experience with adding wood chips or sort of oak infusions and stuff, it's been pretty spotty. So I think we'd need to be careful moving forward. There's a lot of our American single malt whiskey group that are trying other things, maybe a little braver than I am, but they're trying some different stuff. Our view is a minimum 3-year aging is what you need, because in a cask it does two things. It infuses the oak and it also oxidizes. That oxidation is, I think, the key factor to the flavor profile that you really just, I don't think I found anybody to beat it. I found people to mimic the oak aging, but not necessarily beat the oxidation.
Got it. Mark, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Mark. And I would reiterate just what Mark was saying. Even as a supplier, Mark's sort of in the middle with a different business, and they do a great job for the craft whiskeys and getting them. You can all get this in Illinois if you live in whatever state you live in. We supply to 41 states. And a small company like us could never do that with all 41 distributors. However, in Illinois, I do tell, and Mark knows it, I push people towards Binnies because they were one of the first adopters for us. And they give us shelf space that we really don't deserve because we know it doesn't move that much.
They do a lot of that. They really are wonderful. One thing you might know, and actually, Mark, you might not know this either. A few of us on here, we actually host what's called a craft whiskey table every year at a fundraiser for a local homeless shelter. It's a homeless shelter that I've been supporting for 15 years. And every year that we do this whiskey table at their fundraiser, I curate the table with Brett Pontani. He and I walk through the aisles and he helps me decide what we're going to have at the table each year. And a lot of the people whom we've interviewed, so I mentioned this is session number 51, a lot of the people whom we've interviewed, since COVID started, were the distillers that Brett introduced to me while we were creating and curating the lineup for that craft whiskey table. Okay. So, over the years, just by supporting that homeless shelter, I've learned so much about craft whiskey by working directly with Brett to make those selections. Okay. And Colkegan, we had you one year, and it surprised people that you could have such a beautifully smoked whiskey, lightly smoked whiskey here from the United States, and we've had a lot of really good ones there. And you're right, Mark, and Colin. Brett really has a spot in his heart for craft whiskey. He really does love innovation, and he does love supporting the small distilleries whenever he can. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that Eric and I were doing with this group when we started is we wanted to expose a lot of the people here to whiskeys that they might not have known otherwise. And that's one thing that we've done. So anyway, I think that's a great place to end this tonight. I'd like everybody to please unmute yourselves, pour yourselves another dram if you're so inclined. I already finished the sherry sample that I got, so I'm going back, which I loved so much. I'm going to the mesquite right now, to the mesquite smoked. But everybody, please join me in saying cheers and thank you to our special guest tonight, Colin Keegan.
Thank you.
Cheers.
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 Colin,
Cheers.
any
Good
final
question.
words for us before we and by the way, hang around after we turn off the recording because we go to a little after party. Just want to remind you. But Colin, do you have any final words for us before we turn off the recording here?
No, I don't. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate doing this with folks who are drinking craft whiskeys. It's with a little engine that can, and with the support of everybody, places like this, we really just appreciate it. Thank you.
We love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please stay